Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Many boys and teenagers found a way into the Civil War armies by volunteering as drummer boys, inspired by books, stories from a father or uncle who had served in the Mexican War, or maybe a grandfather who campaigned against the British in the War of 1812, and perhaps most of all by the excitement and activity in their own hometowns after the war began as they watched fellow townsmen enlist. They wanted to be part of the action. One of these drummers is pictured here. His name is Harry Keiffer of the 150th Pennsylvania Infantry, part of the famed Bucktail Brigade. Born Henry Martin Keiffer in Mifflinburg, Pennsylvania in 1845, he joined the regiment as a musician in the summer of 1862 and proved a talented drummer. In November 1863, he left the drummer's corps to become a hospital steward. The regimental historian left this note about the promotion. Henry M. Keiffer, a fair haired drummer boy of Company D, in the absence of a hospital steward, was promoted to that position. Being a bright, intelligent youth of good education and a general favorite in the regiment, his appointment gave great satisfaction, though in its reduced condition, the drum corps keenly felt his withdrawal. Henry served in this position through the rest of the war, mustering out with his surviving comrades in 1865, a veteran at 19 years old. In 1881, Harry told his story in Recollections of a Drummer Boy. The illustration of him here is the book's frontispiece. In the book, he tells of the battles of Chancellorsville and Gettysburg through the Overland Campaign in 1864 and through the end of hostilities. I want to share one passage to give you a glimpse of his experience, a flavor of his writing. It's titled The First Day in the Wilderness, and it offers a ground level account of the 1864 battle that blends immediacy with reflection, as you would expect from an account written by any veteran 20 years after the event. Harry traces the transformation from hopeful anticipation to the shock of combat in the rough and tumble Virginia landscape, describing the confusion, noise, and sudden violence with a striking realism. Beyond its vivid imagery, Harry touches on the war's moral dimensions, that strange mixture of fear, duty, and fascination, and it concludes with a moment of humanity as the narrator aids a wounded comrade and a reflection on the necessity of war. Listen for a mention of a Lieutenant Stannard, an officer whom Harry assists. I was unable to find an officer with this surname who was wounded in the wilderness. Harry may have changed the name to protect the man's identity. Harry begins. At last, the long winter, with its deep snows and intense cold, was gone, and on May 4th, 1864, at 4 o'clock in the morning, we broke camp. In what direction we should march, whether north, south, east, or west, none of us had the remotest idea, for the pickets reported the Rapidan River so well fortified by the enemy on the farther bank that it was plainly impossible for us to break their lines at any point there. But in those days, we had a general who had no such word as impossible in his dictionary, and under his leadership, we marched that May morning straight for and straight across the Rapidan in solid column. All day we plodded on, the road strewn with blankets and overcoats, of which the army lightened itself now that the campaign was opening. And at night we halted and camped in a beautiful green meadow. Not the slightest suspicion had we, as we slept quietly there that night, of the great battle, or rather series of great battles, about to open on the following day. Even on that morrow, when we took up the line of march and moved leisurely along for an hour or two, we saw so few indications of the coming struggle that, when we suddenly came upon a battery of artillery in position for action, By the side of the road, someone exclaimed, "Why, hello, fellows! That looks like a business." Only a few minutes later, a staff officer rode up to our regiment and delivered his orders. "Major, you will throw forward your command as skirmishers for the brigade." The regiment at once moved into the thick pine woods and was lost to sight in a moment, although we could hear the bugle clanging out its orders: "Deploy to right and left," as the line forced its way through the tangled and interminable wilderness. Ordered back by the major into the main line of battle, we drummer boys found the troops massed in columns along a road, and we lay down with them among the bushes. How many men were there we could not tell. Wherever we looked, whether up or down the road, and as far as the eye could reach, were masses of men in blue. Among them was a company of Indians, dark, swarthy, stolid looking fellows dressed in our uniform and serving with some Iowa regiment under the command of one of their chiefs as captain. But hark! Pop, 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 pop. The pickets are beginning to fire, the ball is going to open, and things will soon be getting lively. A venturesome fellow climbs up a tall tree to see what he can see, and presently comes scrambling down, reporting nothing in sight but signal flags flying over the treetops, and beyond them, nothing but woods and woods for miles. Orderlies are galloping about, and staff officers are dashing up and down the line or forcing their way through the tangled bushes, while out on the skirmish line is the ever increasing rattle of the musketry. Pop, 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 pop. "Fallen men, forward, guide right." There is something grand in the promptitude with which the order is obeyed. Every man is at his post, forcing its way as best it can through the tangled undergrowth of briars and bushes, across ravines and through swamps. Our whole magnificent line advances until, after a half hour's steady work, we reach the skirmish line, which, hardly pressed, falls back into the advancing column of blue as it reaches a little clearing in the forest. Now we see the lines of gray in the edge of the woods on the other side of the little field. First, their pickets behind clumps of bushes, then the solid column appearing behind the fence, coming on, yelling like demons, and firing a volley that fills the air with smoke and cuts it with whistling lead. Sheltered behind the trees, our line reserves its fire, for it is likely that the enemy will come out on a charge, and then we'll mow them down. With bayonets fixed and yells that make the woods ring, here they come, boys, through the clearing on a dead run. And now, as you love the flag that waves yonder in the breeze, up, boys, and let them have it. Out from our Enfields flashes a sheet of flame, before which the lines of gray stagger for a moment, but they recover and push on, then reel again and quail, at the length fly before the second leaden tempest which sweeps the field clear to the opposite side. With cheers and shouts of victory, our line, now advancing swiftly from behind its covert of the trees, sweeps into and across the clearing, driving back the enemy into the woods from which they had so confidently ventured. The little clearing over which the lines of blue are advancing is covered with dead and dying and wounded men, among whom I find Lieutenant Stannard of my acquaintance. "Harry, help me. I'm bleeding fast. Tear off my suspender or take my handkerchief and tie it as tight as you can. Draw it around my thigh and help me off the field." Ripping up the leg of his trousers with my knife, I soon checked the flow of blood with a hard knot, and none too soon, for the main artery has been severed. Calling a comrade to my assistance, we succeed in reaching the woods and make our way slowly to the rear in search of the division hospital. Whoever wishes to know something of the terrible realities of war should visit a field hospital during some great engagement. No doubt my young readers imagine war to be a great and glorious thing, and so indeed in many regards it is. It would be idle to deny that there is something stirring in the sound of martial music, something strangely uplifting and intensely fascinating in the role of musketry and the loud thunder of artillery. Besides, the march and the battle afford opportunities for the unfolding of manly virtue. And as things go in this disjointed world, human progress seems to be almost impossible without war. Yet still, war is a terrible, a horrible thing. If my young readers could have been with us as we helped poor Stannard off the field that first day in the wilderness, if they could have seen the surgeons of the first division of our corps as we saw them when passing by with the lieutenant on a stretcher, they would, I think, agree with me that if war is a necessity, it is a dreadful necessity. So there you have Harry's story. You may wonder what became of Lieutenant Stannard. Well, Harry goes on to talk about hospitals, field hospitals, surgeons, and then relates the tragic end of Lieutenant Stannard. Despite Harry's best efforts, he did not survive the wound. You may also wonder what became of Harry after he mustered out. Well, he went on to join the ranks of ministers to tend to flocks of the faithful. He did that for decades until he passed away in Atlantic City, New Jersey in 1930 at age 84. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.